Smiles. Life's an everyday adventure. That's my philosophy. Sometimes the best adventure is in reading a great book. Today, for example, was dark and stormy. The perfect weather for snuggling up with a book. I had only read 2 paragraphs when my mother asked me to run errands with her. Not my first choice of activity on a dreary day, but as I put on my raincoat, something happened. My toes began to tingle in my moccasins, and my mood absolutely lifted. What happened? Why the sudden change? I looked in the hall mirror and saw I was smiling. Wow, that is incredible, I thought. I had a small idea starting in my head. I decided to test a theory on my mother. As we walked out to the garage, my mother said, "Why the big smile?" as an equally big smile grew on her face. "It's a great day, that's all." As we stood in the rain smiling at each other, I realized that my theory was solid. Things got goofy. My mother opened the car door, pulled out an umbrella, and asked me to shut the door without getting in the car. "It is a great day. Let's walk to town and enjoy it," she said with her big, cheery smile. Sounded good to me, even in the pouring rain. We flung open the umbrella and walked arm in arm. Before we took many splashy steps, our nosy neighbor, Mrs. Sniffs, caught our attention. "Awful weather, awful day," she said with a frown. My mother smiled at her and said, "I love this weather. It's good for the skin." I suddenly remembered something my grandmother had said long ago. "Mrs. Sniffs, my grandmother always said, raindrops on the face are like kisses from Mother Nature." Mrs. Sniff's frown slowly turned upside down, which was unusual, as Mrs. Sniffs rarely ever smiles. This confirmed that my theory was absolutely true. When we arrived at our first stop, the butcher shop, it was very busy. People seemed a little grumpy and discombobulated. As we waited in line, I decided to put my smile truth into action. I made eye contact and smiled at everyone in line. It was fascinating. Everyone smiled back. The atmosphere in the butcher shop began to feel less grumpy. I was on a roll. Next stop, the bakery across the street. On the way, I noticed the crossing guard in the intersection was drenched with rain. He looked cold and a little sad. Another perfect opportunity for the smile truth. "Thank you, Mr. Crossing Guard," I said with a big smile. The crossing guard's face returned the smile as he nodded. Rain fell off the rim of his cap into his eyes, but he still smiled. We reached the bakery where my friends Mr. Cup and Miss Cake were closing up. They looked a bit stressed. "Sorry, ladies, the shop is closed. There's a leak in the ceiling." I was saddened by the news, as I love their cupcakes. But I smiled and said, "I've got an idea." I told them about my smile experiment, and immediately their mood improved. Then I shared an idea of trying to make the whole town smile with their baked goods that were about to get ruined by the leaky shop. A plan was hatched. My mother and I grabbed as many cookies, cupcakes, and pastries as we could carry under our umbrellas. So did Mr. Cup and Miss Cake. We handed out whatever we could to whomever we could with big smiles. Everyone was happy, especially Mr. Cup and Miss Cake. Now their bakery will be known all throughout the town as the Bakery with a Smile. We returned home, and our dog was at the back door waiting. He was sopping wet, and his head was hanging low. I opened the door, bent down, and smiled at him. Believe it or not, he smiled back. So, with tingly toes in my moccasins, I realized a smile can make all the difference. Molly Moccasins, everyday adventurer.